Yang Wei seemed to be afraid that the house would catch a big fire. So he only asked that and added another sentence. Congratulations on the happy family. The mouth that eats salt and fish sauce immediately eats a huge fire that is burning brightly. The talkative guy hugs his face, lulls loudly and quickly dodges out of sight, putting on a funny face. Jian advised his lover to quickly put down his bow and arrow. The friend was roaring with self-pity and fiery eyes. I've never even heard her say words of love on Father's Day. Bitch. Taek Su has lost control and is shooting arrows everywhere, no matter who they are. He jumped, dodged, and shouted loudly to comfort his friend. But his mouth echoed with an apology. You have to die here today, kid. At the end of the sentence, Taek Su used the stealth technique to target his friend, intending to give him a fatal shot. Jian realized he was telling the truth, not joking. His eyes widened. Jian also had to use his skills to feel the magic power of the centaur star, swinging his hands left and right while his eyes were still closed. Jian grabbed a few arrows aimed at him and rushed forward. In his subconscious, he also saw a few spots of light emitting consecutively, and Taek Su also jumped in the direction his friend avoided to find the weak point and shoot the arrow. Hundreds of fire arrows rushed at Jian at once. But he did not waver, using his bare hands to catch all of those arrows and break them into hundreds of pieces. He started to get really dirty, complaining that the arrows weren't even flies, but they kept swarming like that. Who would have thought that this sentence insulted the star of the Sagittarius, causing him to burst into flames of anger that roared above his head. Taek Su used the secret zodiac technique, the chains of the sun god, and created a large ring of fire. The wind sucked into the fire and performed a skill that made Jian's shirt fly away, revealing his navel. He muttered to himself that this guy is becoming more and more unreasonable. Apollo followed, silently asking Taek Su if he wanted to play with chains in the house. Let's lend Sung Jae all his savings. Money is now just a shrimp landing on your lips. Taek Su stretched his bow and shouted in defiance. This extravagant image made Li Jian understand who that boy Sung Jae looked like and didn't hesitate to burn the house down. It's true that domestic animals have neither feathers nor wings. The two children standing below screamed loudly to stop their father. Taek Su thought it was because the children were worried about him. But unexpectedly they shouted in unison. Dad can't win against Uncle Li Jian. The image of a strong father worthy of being idolized by his children was shattered in a moment. Taek Su let himself fall freely. Even the mass of chained fire did not bother to gather, taking the opportunity to make his friend as stiff as a wax statue. Li Jian gave him a knockout blow, knocking him unconscious. Taek Su suddenly woke up with a big lump on his head. Before he could find Li Jian to continue calculating, he was startled by his voice. Are you awake? How can you be so old that you can trust the words of children? Look at my face. Does it look like the guy who would marry his friend's daughter? As a guy who has no family, explain to the father of two children that children rarely show their emotions to their father because they are too shy. But they think a lot about you. They are buying gifts for you. You too. Just after mentioning it, the two brought coffee and Taek Su's favorite strawberry cake. That's all that made Father Taek Su so emotional that he whimpered like a child and wanted to rush to hug Sung Jae and scream, "My beloved children." But the son seemed to have grown a tail and immediately came to his uncle to show off his achievements to Li Jian. This kid listens to Uncle Li Jian's instructions in everything, and even dares to send fight clips to reporters as he instructed. The cold father-son love scene ended before it even began. Taek Su looked devastated as he looked at his son, who was squealing with joy when the idol touched his head, and even gave the exact same part of his cake to Jian. Suddenly, he raised his head and saw that his cake was missing, and his friend asked why the cake had so much cream. Taek Su immediately knew that his cake was missing the delicious cream on top, trying to point her finger and ask where that piece of ice cream was. Daughter. Unexpectedly, Yuha smiled like the morning sun and replied that your father gave it all to Uncle Jian to eat. Oh, Taek-su screamed loudly, tears running down his cheeks, and ran to Lee Jian to get his strawberry back. But at that speed, how could he stop him? Taek-su continued to get angry, blaming that house for not being able to be peaceful for a day. If this continues, the whole family will have to go out on the streets because there will be no more money to repair the house. Yangwei was punched until his face was burned and obediently sat in the corner while Larry Queen stitched it up. He only dared to mumble that Hugo couldn't teach his child, but he didn't dare to rant like before, for fear of being punched again and sending him back to the drudgery. Always, while sitting and watching her eldest father like a child being jealous of each strawberry, her phone vibrated to inform her that she had a new text message. News that was not very expected. On the screen with the old Lee Jian wallpaper was the news that the Gemini Saints were urgently summoned because there was a red-level disaster looming at the Thien Lee Bridge, in the sky of Haiyan Beach near the capital Manila of the Philippines. Dark clouds gathered, bringing with them lightning as if it wanted to tear apart the space. Below that, on the sand temple, are groups of soldiers, lined up in neat rows facing the sea, waiting. The general of the Lion Star clenched his fists and shouted loudly. Now the saint is absent. We must replace him to deal with these red-level disasters that are coming. This is an opportunity for the lion to weaken once again, be on top of the world. Hearing the encouragement of the generals of the entire Zodiac army, their morale flared up and they shouted strongly. Only Yuha stood rubbing her head tiredly, wanting to go home so badly. Standing outside the command camp of the Capricorn Legion was a crowd of people waiting for instructions from a man with white hair and wrinkled skin, muttering curses at the wind dragon. His hand caressed an unknown object that was emitting a seductive blue color or curled his lips into a smile that only we could understand. He muttered to himself that the gift he had sent must have been sent to the rightful owner. Despite the world facing fierce beasts, Lee Jian used Taek-su's super cute bear apron to focus on making new weapons, even though this was the nth time he failed. The interior was still stable enough for Jian to use, but the Centaur Saint's house looked like an abandoned building with the word under repair written on the outside. And the burned roof was flying away. Taek-su is diligently repairing like a bricklayer, opening a door cheerfully welcoming newcomers. Secretary Un Yerin of Sagittarius Star was holding a suitcase in her hand and holding a cardboard box. After seeing her for a long time, she immediately had to ask what was wrong with her house. Taek-su doesn't want to explain. Just go inside first. The TV screen was showing news about the thousand-legged disaster. Taek-su quickly explained that his daughter Yuha was on duty there, so a father like him had to watch. Suddenly looking at the box in Yerin's hand, Taek-su wondered what was in it. As soon as I answered, I saw it in front of the door, so I brought it in. From the box came a loud scratching sound to see where Lee Jian was, making both of them startled and let it go immediately. Inside the room, Lee Jian broke something again because the level of the crafting tools was too low, so the materials were destroyed. Looking at the broken sword on the crafting table, he muttered and cursed that he would lose his job again, knowing that he needed higher-level equipment if he wanted to create items of the desired level. The highest level he had in his hand was only a temporary artifact hammer. Thinking about his real, genuine hammer, Lee Jian couldn't help but regret it. He hadn't felt its presence in 20 years and could only consider it lost. Lime and Piggy Bank also have high levels, but the two of them alone are not enough for him to create mid-level or higher holy items. But Jian cannot give up because he must prepare before confronting the star of history. Suddenly the status window informed him that he had recently been hiding the breath of other zodiac stars besides himself and Taek-su. With a quick glance outside the door, he decided to go out and see what was going on. Inside the box was a device that communicated with a loud voice. I asked solemnly if this was the home of the centaur star Hugo Ather? Long time no see. I'm Sengevich. Uncomfortably looking at the statue. Taek-su did not appear happy to see it at all. As soon as Jian came out, he heard his friend say that he carried the artifact hammer on his shoulder to look cool, and thought that whoever dared to hide in this holy place turned out to be the number 35 of the Goat Day. As soon as I saw the young man, the statue roared loudly, "Hello Jian." It looked good. Ignoring Yaren's surprise, he reintroduced himself as Sergeyevich Vladimir Ivan, the Capricorn Saint. People introduced their full middle names like that. But Jian came out and repeated Serbashan, making the statue scream, "My name is Sergeyevich." In addition to his strength, Sergeyevich is also a special creator like Li Jian. After he disappeared in the Demon Tower 20 years ago, all the ultimate weapons in the world were created by him alone. From gloves, hats, belts to offensive and defensive weapons or medicinal herbs, there were marks of Sergeyevich's teeth reaching out. I was just about to explain that the reason I came to the Centaur's house to talk to Jian was because there was something I needed to apologize for. But before he could finish talking about that, he reached out and grabbed the statue's head, throwing it in his hand when Sergeyevich tried to save himself in the hope of joining forces. Jian swung his hammer and destroyed the statue as excitedly as a toy. "Oh man, don't you wait until the end to see what he has to say?" "No. His face looks more prestigious to convince my friend. That old goat can't say anything other than being promiscuous. Besides, why would he join forces with that goat to glue an elephant? Will he ever get me anything? What ingredients are there?" The communication line was disconnected as soon as the statue shattered. But Sergeyevich just sat in the room laughing to himself as if there was no light bulb in this camp to shine for him. It wasn't until his subordinates came in to report that Sergeyevich lifted the curtain and walked out. How could the scene of a 1,000-foot disaster that had appeared in 20 years be without his old goat face? "Hello, everyone. I am currently in Manila, Philippines, which is also where the Red Level 1,000-legged disaster will carry out its attack. It used to be the type of disaster that was wiped out by hero Li Jian 20 years ago. Now on the coast of Manila, the Philippines will appear again, with many powerful saints gathering here to deal with the disaster. Prominent on the Leo star's side are Vice Star Chon Yuha and President Oliver. To increase strength, the Pisces Magic Guild must be gathered. Next are the experts responsible for defending the front line of Kim Ngu Kai Tin. In the back row there are saints from Aquarius who specialize in dealing with the power of melting. Even the Capricorn Kai Tin, responsible for creating and enhancing the weapons necessary for battle, also participated in the battle, emphasizing that Capricorn zodiac star was directly in command. The cameraman filmed Sergeyevich in close-up, causing Jian's displeasure to appear, and the fake devil appeared as real. He suddenly raised his hand. The wind brought a hammer with a green halo with the symbol of the sophistry Kai Tin on its face. But surprisingly, the reporter said that it was the sacred object of the Capricorn zodiac Kai Tin, the hammer that bestows reality. Even Taek Su asked, "It seems like it's your stuff." Jian, how could he not know? The pair of tiny eyes stared in confusion, continuing to watch the scene where the Capricorn Saint was strengthening his troops with his divine hammer right before the match began. Jian roared, "You guys are barking nonsense. That's my stuff," pointing straight at Sergeyevich on the screen. He was raising his practical hammer and receiving the cheers of the people. Jian continued to curse that this damn goat must have its neck broken before it can be used as a female historian. Wearing the whole apron, he jumped up and searched for it until it was hot. "Your father has been holding onto you for a long time." But the reporter's sound successfully held him back as he zoomed in on something rising from the bottom of the sea, pushing the seawater slowly up. At this time, the sky began to storm. The water from earlier had flowed down, leaving only a monster that looked like an octopus but was extremely hideous with many eyes and tentacles. Its body is surprisingly large. Each wave can cause the seawater to fluctuate violently. The reporter shouted, "A disaster of 1,000 feet. A disaster of 1,000 feet. Ladies and gentlemen, that woman didn't fight, so she cheered like it was Tet." But everyone present felt both fear and surprise. Under the surface of the giant tentacle rising above the water are countless small, sharp legs. This half-octopus, half-centipede thing has a red level, enough to disturb an entire area, just as they were about to rush into battle to keep it hot. Their vision collided with something being tightly wrapped around the tip of a tentacle. That thing was screaming loudly while its whole body was tense, pointing at that person in confusion. Unbelievable. Stephen Marker, the Lion Saint, was clenching his ass muscles, trying to pull his big bones out of the thousand-legged calamity's tightening tentacles. The scene that drew that child in the eyes of the soldiers was Stephen bravely using the giant bone to fight the disaster. It would be a shame to lose $1 billion to buy giant bones because of this monster. Only the Lion Kai Ting's people were extremely panicked. They didn't expect that their saint was still crazy because of that giant T-bone. Sergeyevich came up behind Oliver at some point, startling him and stopping calling the star's name. The old goat man's face clearly had no goodwill at all. When he opened his mouth to provoke him, he saw the Star Master and disaster. So was he so confused? Or let me command the main army for you? But Oliver was unfamiliar with the lion's desire for command. He regained his composure and prepared to give instructions immediately to prevent this old goat from stealing the credit. First, let all of the Lion Kai Ting's disciples drink the physical strength-enhancing medicine provided by the Capricorn Kai Ting. Next, order Gemini Kai Tin to use spells at sea so that the apostles can fight as comfortably as on land. The Star of Libra is tasked with enhancing physical strength, mobility, and defense. Finally, the Venus Star is tasked with establishing defenses to prevent emergencies and deal with disasters on shore. After assigning tasks to the legions, the Lion Star Guild leader Oliver jumped down to fight. The army of Kai Ting lions seemed to be injected with a stimulant, and immediately became wild and crazy like lions in the deep forest. Oliver roared to start the attack immediately, followed by hundreds of people from the Star Lion, aiming at the thousand-legged monster and rushing forward, surfing on the surface of our water like a wave. Oliver immediately ordered the use of the Night Beast transformation skill. Golden light flashed around. The entire body and skin of the lion army changed. To be more precise, they actually turned into dark beasts with thick fur and sharp claws. After the vanguard team finished, Yuha immediately shouted to signal the footsteps of the second line to come. All of Aquarius's apostles silently unlocked all their magic power, gradually soaring and converging high in the sky, forming a giant block of magic in the shape of a lion with 5 four-pointed stars on it. Looking majestic, the white night beast rushed forward like a real animal towards the thousand-legged disaster, opened its wide mouth full of fangs and bit hard on its body. Both beds seemed to be stuck in opposite positions. Neither side could move. Saint President Oliver roared at the opportune moment. All the apostles of the Star Lion rushed forward in the form of all kinds of beasts, releasing his magic power and swinging his weapon with full force. He wanted to make octopus salad right away. Compared to the size, it certainly wasn't the same. But in terms of quantity and ferocity, it was definitely better. The group of beasts jumped on the Calamity's body, clinging everywhere from its head to its tentacles, hitting and stabbing it, causing it to struggle violently in pain. Stephen firmly held the big bone and didn't let go. He was shaken to the point of loosening his brain and screaming, "Can't these idiots stay still until they let go of my big bone first?" Having to attack tirelessly and not leave one's head alone anymore. Oliver doesn't care that Stephen's mother is the planet's master. He yells at him to stay still. Of course, the Lion Saint refused. The two sides argued back and forth without paying attention to the battle situation. Saintess Aquarius stood from afar and saw the lion's eyes as clear as a snake's head and eyes. I was afraid that the number of soldiers returning from the station would be very small. Yuha's footsteps landed on the ground, but her words reached the first saint. "Two stupid men. I didn't want to save Stephen. But when I saw this scene, I couldn't sit still." After saying that, she knelt down in a ready-to-run position, without any need for the saintess to Strengthen her. Her eyes were already glowing and her whole body rushed forward at lightning speed, aiming straight at the owner of the Zodiac Palace. He was shaken to the point of madness. Steven soon realized something had changed. Yuha's blade flew past and cut off the tentacle holding the giant bone, dropping both it and the furry Zodiac Master into the sea. The rescue was successful. The girl indifferently looked down at Steven in the cracked tree falling into the sea. As soon as he turned upside down and spit out water, Yuha's foot mercilessly stomped on his face. The soldiers' jaws dropped when they saw it. The entire army of hundreds of people supported each other in fighting. Just enough to scratch the itch. But Deputy Commander Yuha only jumped one step out to the sea and cut off the tentacles of the thousand-legged disaster. Yuha stood arrogantly observing the situation with calm eyes. Only Steven was screaming for her to get off of him. Their saint has been saved. Kai Tin's lion army no longer has any problems. Their morale is sky high. They are talking to each other to deal with the disaster. The other legions also rushed forward, not letting the Lion Star monopolize all the credit for destroying the monster. Some use physical attacks. Others use magic to aim straight at its weak point. The storm was getting bigger and bigger. The ocean waves kept pounding because of the movements coming from the giant disaster. But everyone realized that it was gradually slowing down. So they joined together to force it to go. In the deep sea, red eyes with tiny pupils suddenly glowed. The sea water covering the unfortunate child suddenly receded by more than half. In less than a few seconds, it jumped dozens of meters high, waiting to collapse towards the shore. The Taurus army joined forces to build a fence using steel wall skills to prevent the flood. Temporarily it worked, but inside I was panicking, not understanding why there was a tsunami at this time. The light above their heads suddenly decreased. When they looked up, they saw many giant tentacles with sharp wings collapsing without time to react. Even though he was so damn busy, Oliver still had to look back and roar, "Oh, there's another thousand-legged disaster. Still with a red-level disaster. This monster is incredibly big and has thousands of legs. Its shadow falls on the beach, wanting to cover the sun, bringing terror to all the troops present there." Standing in front of his tent, Sergeyevich shouted, again as if something interesting had happened. A thousand-legged disaster still has a chance to be eaten. But a thousand-legged disaster should just give up and become a human. After speaking softly, he opened the lid of something with a knob in the middle. Someone behind him asked what was in his hand, and Sergeyevich reflexively replied that the guinea pig missile's detonation device was installed near the beach. Wait, who dares to ask such a question? The old goat turned around and asked, "Who is this?" The knife from the tip of the projectile stabbed into Sergeyevich's hand, causing the detonation device to shatter. Before he could understand what had happened, Lime jumped up and grabbed the whole person into his mouth like he was eating something delicious. Following behind the fairy Peach is a pink and purple vortex of unknown origin. Li Jian's disdainful voice was heard, quite praising Sir Bashan for being so good. Don't you feel that you're too much when the disciples at sea try to alleviate the disaster? And you intend to use a bomb to blow them all up? On the other side of the space-time gate is still Hugo's house. Li Jian alone wearing a hat and carrying a sword appears like a gangster coming to demand Sergeyevich's remorse. Sticking the tip of his sword into the ground, he grinned at Sergeyevich and said this would be an additional class after 20 years of teaching the correct method of making octopus sashimi. On the sea, waves and tornadoes are rolling. And Yuha is currently fighting hard against the disaster to reduce the burden on the legions. Having just faced the thousand-legged disaster, most of them were already tired. So she thought she would deal with the lemurs later. The most important thing was to deal with the strongest one first. Thinking so, Yuha activated the speed combo skill, kicked the water and rushed straight towards the monster. In my mind, I silently remembered the hundreds of times I had watched the video of the 1,000-foot disaster attack that Uncle Li Jian performed in the past. That year, because so many people were jealous of Li Jian's strength, they stood by and watched him attack the monster alone. Thanks to that, Yuha now has some knowledge of attacking it alone. This monster often uses small tentacles to pierce its lips. So Li Jian used lightning speed to rush straight into the center before the sharp ones reached. Today Yuha imitated his uncle's path, following the water surface and gliding quickly while also avoiding all of the tentacle's incoming punches. The typical Li Jian method that year was deeply imprinted in the young girl's mind. The uncle decisively jumped up and cut off all the tentacles in a single move. So Yuha swung the spear in a circle so fast that it emitted red light, putting all his strength into throwing his weapon at the thousand-legged monster. Using the Fire Lotus move to compensate for his uncle's superior speed, he successfully cut the Calamity's tentacle into hundreds of pieces, falling to the sea surface, landing straight on a large tentacle closer to the host to avoid the trash that fell on them. Yuha wanted to approach the Calamity's body. Then he stomped down straight into the sight of the monster with its wide eyes. Keeping maximum concentration, Yuha gathered all the strength he could into the spear while in mid-air, confidently performing all the postures and moves exactly like the scar-faced uncle did years ago. The spear sped away, carrying all the young girl's strength, emitting light like a baby sun on top of the disaster's head. But Yuha immediately saw that a small, faster tentacle had easily wrapped around the spear without it even having a chance to contact the monster's skin. Tightening the weapon it had just captured, its eyes flashed brightly, placing a large tentacle on the head of the human girl who was planning to assassinate him. Yuha couldn't escape in time, but that muscular arm wrapped around her neck and pushed her back immediately. Steven threw his body up onto the net with his back to shield the young girl, receiving such a shocking blow that both of them had to grit their teeth to endure it. The impact threw both of them dozens of meters away. Yuha's vision became more and more blurry, making it difficult to resist. Watching the two being whipped far away, the soldier half swimming and half struggling with the tentacles screaming. The Saint and the Vice Star's hope were still blown away like that. Oliver also had to brace himself and try to fight. The eyes of Yuha and the humans became dirty and lacking. Even small calamities could easily trap them. She was wondering if her Uncle Jian was here. Would he hold the great sword and turn it on to fly mode? In her confusion, she thought so, but when she saw the back of someone who looked like her uncle rushing up like that, Yuha screamed loudly, "Uncle, is that my uncle?" With so many eyes, the disaster's eyes could easily catch the image of Li Jian rushing towards him, so he pushed a small disaster to block his way. Who would have thought that Li Jian would not hesitate? His hand swinging the sword with pleasure, cutting sweetly past the baby octopus's head, landing on its head. He smiled happily and performed patching the Tai Sun Mountain without a moment of hesitation. The arm that launched the sword pierced the disaster's head with a large hole. It swirled through the water and rushed towards the beach before the horrified gazes of both monsters and humans. Because the power he left behind was truly too terrible, the sizzling smoke that remained was only a small effect of the sword planted on the beach, making an endless clicking sound. Li Jian had just landed on a piece of shovel belonging to the monster that had just been killed, and was questioned. "Hello brother, why did you appear here? Why are you surprised to see that there's only an octopus and you guys keep making a fuss about it? I came here to show you off just once." That bossy look made the soldiers point their faces and argue back. There are hundreds of people here who are more than capable of handling that thousand-legged disaster. So don't show off. Oh, his mixed beak didn't curse anymore because suddenly it was picked up by the tentacle and lifted up. He looked back and realized that, in addition to the thousand-legged disaster that was lifting him up, on the other side of the tentacle was something familiar red. Very. As soon as he realized that the poisonous spear belonged to his descendant, he and the spear were suddenly forced into his mouth with jagged fangs. Yuha screamed, "Oh my god. It's you." That's when the soldiers no longer dared to curse Li Jian. "I just cursed a little bit. But now the only person capable of catching this monster has been captured by it. So there's no business left. I thought I would be able to digest a delicious package of human meat snacks on this trip. But I didn't expect that a familiar blue energy would shoot up from its belly, making my soul completely numb. The thunderous blue light that erupted was the disaster lotus skill that hit the demon's head straight. It squealed loudly like a pissed-off pig. But what surprised the Legion more was the calamity lotus, which was the ultimate skill of Yuha's vice star. Why wasn't it red but instead an illusory blue color? The spear pierced through the monster's skin, absorbing more and more power, then chipping away at the monster's entire body. But Li Jian grabbed it tightly and screamed loudly. The monster made a few loud noises and shook its whole body like it was going crazy, bringing with it several thousand-legged calamities nearby that pulled their combs along. The whole sea was full of monsters shaking wildly following Li Jian's spear-twirling dance. He stabbed the monster straight in the head with his spear-cleaning skill, officially exploding fireworks from head to ass, roaring, full of effects from lighting to sound, making the audience wide-eyed and speechless, looking at Jian's final blow, blowing everything up and then pouring it down like rain. He laughed again. It's been a long time since he's been able to cut something like that. Smiling with delight as he looked at the work with a huge artistic hole in it. Even if it was a 1,000-legged monster or a 1,000-legged monster in Li Jian's eyes, it was just an octopus. Nothing more, nothing less, standing under the rain that was half seawater and half octopus meat. He arrogantly wanted to see if the rest of them knew how to escape on their own. He was ready to fertilize the mouths of the stubborn ones. Looking down from above, one could see that the body of the 1,000-legged calamity had been cut into pieces. It was of course dead, floating on the waves. The atmosphere suddenly fell. I couldn't believe that he alone destroyed the monster. Li Jian's reputation is truly genuine. Not a bad one. The status window informed him that people he had never met were now showing immense surprise and respect for Li Jian. Where did all those guys curse him from? The reporter who jumped out just now was speechless. The reporter's trembling hand holding the microphone had to explain to everyone that this was the person who had been discussed for a very long time. Hero Li Jian had just returned. Immediately defeat the 1,000-legged disaster. All over the crowded places where people waiting for news erupted in resounding cheers. The return of hero Li Jian lit a great fire of hope, which soon became a circulating legend, giving birth to a saint. Sutras about the constellation Ophiuchus are revered by everyone. Inside, the entire story of this constellation is recorded, enough to make the other zodiac stars feel panicked. This was completely new to Li Jian. He flipped through the pages of the book in his hand to check it out, and realized that his power would increase if more saints read it. Yuha's voice happily shouted loudly from the beach, looking at her so happy and excited. He stomped in front of her and asked her, "Oh wait, what's so white and white like that?" Knowing clearly that it was his giant bone. Jian still kept asking, but the girl kept trying to avoid asking. Hesitantly, stretching out his hand, Jian showed the child that the spear handle was broken. "Let me make a new weapon for you." Yuha's eyes lit up when she heard about the weapon her uncle personally made. But the loudest howl was from this guy, Steven, as if someone had done it for him. The atmosphere was so awkward. Just now, someone said to make a weapon for this lion. Steven, in addition to being generous, is also thick-skinned. He pointed at Yuha and reminded her that this girl is my close subordinate. Shaking his hand at himself, Steven finished the important sentence. "Your weapon being used by me means I can use it, right? How can you not be happy? I heard that 20 years ago you were also creating sacred objects for the stars of the zodiac." Then he continued to ramble, and by the way, he also paid attention to the bones. Jian was gradually getting irritated when Steven laughed loudly and said he would forgive Yuha for stealing the bones. He couldn't bear it anymore, pointing his finger at this bearded guy and cursing. And yet, there was a loud bang somewhere, and a column of smoke in the shape of an old goat appeared from somewhere, causing Steven to open his mouth and ask, "Can this guy have the ability to scream to create internal energy?" Not knowing what it was, asking such a pointless question. Jian cursed again and said who did that. He didn't know. Smoke covered everywhere, blowing directly into the crowd of people on the front line and then quickly dispersed inside with the wind. Feeling completely confused and not knowing whether to run or what to do, the Taurus army suddenly discovered that the growl was coming from the beast of the lion team that was fighting side by side with them just now. The beast is ferocious before the delicious prey. Anyone standing next to them would be slapped in a painful blow that would cut through the sky. No one could understand why the entire Lion Star team now bared their fangs and claws, going crazy and turning to attack the Legion's people. Yuha stood from afar and saw the two sides fighting haphazardly, plus the explosive explosion from earlier for no reason. Behind her there was a voice explaining the explosion of the guinea pig bomb. Regretfully clicked his tongue when the explosion wasn't big enough, causing the three of them to turn around in surprise and see something hitting the ground. Steven was like a girl taking a bath and being peeped on, screaming loudly, "Who are you?" Sergeyevich is wearing a giant suit of armor that looks like he came out of the movie, Robot War Comes. In his left hand, he was carrying a peach. Lime fainted a long time ago and poked Jian's beak and cursed loudly. If it was Sergeyevich, he'd have to ask again. Why would he detonate a guinea pig bomb? My subordinates are still fighting over there. This bully. Sergeyevich looked down at the three of them from above, and angrily said that this is the beginning. My friend. Jian threw his hand back, blandly telling those lunatic lion saints that they were your game. Not the old goat. That's right. But I'm just trying to make this old guy laugh and laugh. He put something like a small pipe in his hand, thinking it would make a chirping sound. But no. It hissed like two stainless steel pots touching each other and making a squeaking sound. The sound echoed through the smoke, causing the lion corps to go crazy. They seemed to hear the sound of their fellow humans and turned around to look, temporarily abandoning the meaty Taurus prey. The whole group rushed back toward the beach. The group of people with shields and hammers prepared to fight the beasts, passing through the star of the zodiac like a gust of wind. Whoever was in command did not care. Several of them crushed Yuha's body, causing her to lie on the ground. The rest jumped towards Jian, knocking him back. This brat, Jian, was extremely exhausted after the battle with the disaster. Sergeyevich laughed with great joy when he saw the group of beastmen pressing Jian's face down on the sand. The two children on both sides were crushed, leaving only Steven standing without understanding why he was not attacked. That's why he curled his mouth and cursed. What did that bitch do to my apostles? That they don't listen to me? It's because they drank the essence I gave them. The chemical reaction is a little based on the smoke inhaled in the medicine. Now they can't hear anyone else except my noise. After hearing the old goat's plot, Steven cursed no less than the fishmongers. It wasn't until Sergeyevich threw the barber's sword on the ground that he silently stared at Jian's weapon. Sergeyevich, like many others, thought that Steven Marker could not resist the charm of the weapon of the 13th saint. What he wants is simple. Take that thing, kill Li Jian and it will belong to you. It's not Steven who is easy to do wrong. He crossed his arms and asked why I had to listen to you killing that guy for no reason. Sergeyevich raised his huge robot paw, teasingly wiggling it in front of the lion saint, sarcastically asking, "Don't you want your apostle to wake up? Otherwise, it's okay." Sergeyevich's smile spread wide on his lips, telling me he understood what we had in common. Steven rolled his eyes like someone who was told they had a black heart. I know we are all made self-conscious by Li Jian's existence. Overriding Steven's objections, the Capricorn leisurely said, "Otherwise why do you care about Li Jian's weapons? That's the clearest evidence that you did it to overcome your low self-esteem. In your eyes, Li Jian's power is like a tall wall that can never be overcome. As for me, that guy has outstanding manufacturing ability, always producing better things. Capricorn is ready to turn the cards over. That guy is like a tall, solid wall that cannot be overcome. No matter how high Steven climbed, he would never get anywhere. So Sergeyevich wants his voice to reach Steven's brain. Let's kill Jian together so we won't be as bad as that guy. I will make you the ultimate weapon that is unique in this world. Sergeyevich did not stop for a second, continuously influencing Steven's psychology to join forces to overcome Li Jian. Once you kill the monkey, you will become the supreme star of the Zodiac. So take that sword and use it to use Li Jian. Lion. Steven pulled out the sword that still had a bit of handle on the tip. And heard Yuha scream, "Oh my lord, it's just the tip of your tongue. Don't trust anyone." Steven didn't answer, just glanced at Jian with his head down on the ground, causing the girl to scream even more in panic. I couldn't stop him anymore, so I had to play the begging card. With the threat, if you dare to touch Mr. Jian, I won't leave it alone. With his big bare feet approaching Li Jian, Steven held up the sword as if he wanted to stab it, making Sergeyevich very excited, standing behind him and screaming, "Fuck you!" But with a thud, the tip of the sword stabbed straight into the robot's stomach, pushing it backwards before Yuha's surprised eyes. Capricorn also doesn't understand why this lion missed such a great opportunity. "You shut my mouth," Steven roared fiercely. "Do you think I will listen to the person who turned my subordinate into this?" Dao focused on training to surpass Li Jian, spending most of his time feeling self-conscious and all, flicking his fragrant middle finger in Capricorn's face. Steven said, "I have no intention of killing Li Jian to take that position like you crave." Wow, Li Jian has to look at this guy in a different light. Suddenly listening to the complacent words that I was now stronger than Li Jian, he felt angry and didn't bother to argue. Steven ran like a hairy chimpanzee towards Sergeyevich without stopping. "Are you saying you're going to make me a fancy weapon? How could you surpass Li Jian in the first place?" Sergeyevich's face fell down, clearly showing his age. This guy was too arrogant and had to show him what it was like to have his hands full of guns. When words were exhausted, violence reigned supreme. Steven punched the robot's heavy gun arm straight, causing it to spread out like a large blooming flower. While Sergeyevich still didn't understand the toothless move, the lion jumped out from behind and prepared another attack. The old goat man was both afraid of death and angry and roared, "Don't even dream." Then opened all the functions on his body and jerked his whole body back out of range. His feet stomped on the ground to gain momentum and jumped up. Sergeyevich fired all kinds of heavy missiles at the place where Steven had just stood, making that place bounce up an extremely large column of sand waves accompanied by heavy lighting effects. The old goat man burst into laughter, predicting that the famous Zodiac lion would succumb to this attack. It wasn't easy for Steven to transform into a muscular beast, with a rocket in his mouth and his claws jumping out of the thick smoke. His strong teeth bit down and crushed the rocket. Steven secretly remembered that 20 years ago, he did have low self-esteem like this old man said. But by persevering for many years, even when he falls down, he stands up and challenges his limits. Steven has found a way to surpass Li Jian. He curled up with the strength of a real star lion, activating the skill of electric lightning, scattering into the space before his eyes. The whole area lit up following the path of the lightning bolt, cutting Sergeyevich's robot into pieces. But that wasn't enough to satisfy Steven. He stomped his foot firmly on the chest of the armor, complimenting how thick it was. But the leaf in Steven's hand was different. He grabbed it, pulled it out, and pinched it into the sky. Because he was bored, he opened his mouth and cursed. Even Bao Bitch fought like crazy without using protective gear. But this old man hid in his armor. "Quickly get the fuck out of here to me." Sergeyevich's side shouted ah. Steven's side also went oh oh oh. Suddenly Li Jian's boring face popped out and asked, "What are you doing? How long are you planning to fight?" The other two guys turned to look at him and then widened their eyes and asked, "Hello, how did you escape so well? It's your fault that I'm so impatient." But those weak beastmen, look at Yuha, she figured it out on her own. "Don't make any noise until it's time for me to perform." Jian conveniently kicked Steven aside, smiling down at Sergeyevich, confiding in an acquaintance. That look made the old goat cold. If this guy knew how to talk properly, who would be afraid? 20 years ago, Sergeyevich sat in front of a smiling man who heard about the prophecy, Li Jian will die in the Devil's Tower. At that time, Capricorn froze and did not understand. Everyone had heard that prophecy. But what that person called him to was not to gossip, but to carry out that plan. The plan that made him shudder. Immersed in old memories, Sergeyevich said that from that moment on, he had planned to kill Li Jian. But he did not care about the past like that. Angry, he yelled at Hai Fong not to beat around the bush. I asked you who killed me. Understand? I understand, but I have to tell the process so that Sergeyevich can claim important rights. That I will say who it is on the condition that Li Jian guarantees my safety. He stuck his thumb into the Capricorn's mouth, causing him to scream in pain. But he conveniently pulled the old man's face closer to his so he could better understand the situation, since when did he think Li Jian was there?